Hello, you are watching a recording of the Shocks, Knocks and Skill Building Blocks webinar, all about the most recent report from Good Things with Nesta and Accenture. So we unfortunately lost the first part of the recording when we tried to do it on Zoom from the live webinar, but I am here to just fill in the blanks of what was missed. So this would have originally been said by Al Mathers, Head of Research at Good Things Foundation, who chaired the meeting, who you will see later on in the actual recording of the session. So for now, just pretend I'm her. I'm Caris and I work in comms at Good Things. And as I said, I'm just here to fill in the blanks. So we have speakers today from Accenture, Nesta, Learn for Life and Good Things Foundation, who are all of the partners in FutureProof. So why are we here? Well, the UK employment landscape has undergone considerable change across sectors and regions since the Industrial Revolution. However, the ascent of digital technologies has, at an unprecedented pace, transformed what we produce and consume, and therefore the skills needed to sustain these new industries. As a result, the working population has struggled to keep up with this digital demand, highlighted by the fact that 82% of roles require digital skills, yet 52% of working age adults do not have these. This is not a new story for 2021, but when we layer over the impact of the pandemic with the unemployment forecast set to hit 2.6 million by the end of the year, the challenges for people looking for work in low-paid roles or insecure employment are dramatically intensified. Addressing the disconnect in demand and supply of digital skills, our ability as workers to keep up, to stay relevant, to remain motivated and even to retain employment is therefore a political, social and economic and personal priority. To do this, we need new approaches that not only help society build back better, but help individuals feel valuable and motivated to achieve their employment goals and to adapt to the ever-evolving workplace. FutureProof Skills for Work is one innovative programme which has demonstrated a sustained impact against the most challenging backdrops, showing how societal and individual employability goals can be achieved, and that's what we're here to share today. Thank you, Al, for letting me relay those fantastic words to whoever's watching. And after this, we will cut to our first speaker, who we did manage to capture on the original recording, and that is Linda from Corporate Citizenship at Accenture UK, who will explain why Accenture invested in the FutureProof Skills for Work. Over to Linda.
Globally, we have a community investment program which is really focusing on supporting the talent of today and tomorrow to deliver the skills that they to develop the skills that they need to thrive in the digital economy. So of course there's a huge changing nature of work at the moment, sort of in the wake of the fourth industrial revolution, and there's a lot of quick, fast-paced change, and we're trying our best to help, I guess, people in our communities navigate that. So I guess one of those quite well quoted stats that you hear quite a lot, but I still think it's worth saying because it's so stark, is that about 65% of all of our primary school children in school today are expected to do jobs that don't exist today when they get to adulthood, which just tells you something about the sort of pace of change that is happening. If you think back when we were kids, who knew there would be such a thing as a social media manager or digital marketing person. But and I guess with all of us living and working longer and further into old age, that kind of need for lifelong learning is incredibly important and is becoming so kind of increasingly important. And that motivation, as you get further and further into your career, to do that sort of upskilling to remain relevant to the workplace is becoming increasingly important too. It's not like you go to college or university or to school once and then finish learning there and never again. This is something that you actively have to manage throughout your career. And from what we see, digital skills is becoming increasingly important part of that kind of essential, that mix of essential skills. So I mentioned social media managers, etc., but that's not kind of the majority of jobs, of course. We're seeing that people who do all sorts of jobs are needing digital skills. People who work on as retail assistants on the shop floor of a high street shop are increasingly needing digital skills. People who work in warehouses, people who work in restaurants, and so on, all are needing digital skills to a much wider degree. And if you don't have that, the likelihood is that you'll be held back and excluded from some opportunities that you could have had. So one of the reasons we get involved in this is, of course, we see a lot of this happening on the ground within our own clients that we work with every day. We work with most of the big businesses across the UK and the world. And we see this change and are part of the change a lot of the time as kind of technology consultants. And so what we want to do as a responsible employer is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to take part in that change and that opportunity. Yet we see that a lot of the time through our own research that actually budgets within businesses, especially smaller businesses, to support employees to upskill and to remain maintain an up-to-date skill set is really limited and falls way short of what's needed. Something like only 7% of CEOs in our research said that they would increase training budgets in the next year. So that tells you something about the sort of struggle that a lot of employees individually face, because it then becomes a thing where they have to manage it themselves when their employer aren't supporting that. So I think what we really need here is and obviously what we'll hear a lot today is that we need to work together as businesses, as educators, the not-for-profit sector, government, etc., to really kind of solve this problem together, because in silos we can't do it alone. And that brings me on a little bit to, I guess, how we support this agenda, and then I'll finish there. So at the digital skills agenda, as I said, we can't do it alone. So because of that, we, as part of, within Accenture, have, together with organizations like the Good Things Foundations and other, started a kind of coalition called Future.now, which is there to support employers and ask employers to pledge to kind of further this digital skills agenda within their workplace. So we've had over 100 employers to date pledge to join and close the digital skills gap, which is really exciting. We're releasing a guide helping smaller businesses at the moment to kind of give them a bit of a, I guess, roadmap for how to do it within their own small businesses as well. So it's peer-to-peer businesses working together. We're also making available free online learning resources, many of which have been used as part of this, the Future Proof course, including our digital skills courses, which have had some 94,000 learners in the last year alone. And we were part of the Department of Education's skills toolkit, which is great. And of course, last but not least, we invest in a project such as Future Proof, working with organizations like the Good Things Foundation and all the wonderful online centers that sit under that umbrella to really reach those in our communities on the ground who really need the support most. So I won't tell you, there are other speakers who's now going to obviously tell you more about what that's about. So I'm going to finish there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. I know we're really asking you to cram a huge amount in the time, so thank you. That was really encompassing. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to just remind you, if you do have questions for Linda, please do post them in the Q&A. We've allotted a decent amount of time at the end to come back to them. Our second speaker is Hayley Nelson, BME, Director and Co-founder for Learn for Life and a future-proof delivery partner, who will now talk about the reality on the ground.
Okay, so we found in the past that a lot of IT courses are very formal, they are required set days and times, and there's very little funding to actually engage real people who have lives, who are working, who have children, who've got the extra commitments. And the programs that are normally available are very prescriptive, so people don't engage with them. So they may do, say, a Microsoft Word course when really all they want to do is create a CV. So we find that what works is a person-centered approach, looking at the individual and what they want to do and need to do. Don't see them as a statistic, and not everyone fits into the same box. FutureProofed allowed us to use different platforms and to give individuals tasters and one-to-one support and give them the direction that they needed to get into employment. We started by having sort of tasters in the classroom, and doing it together worked well because people could support each other. But some individuals actually preferred to work alone, and that was fine as well. So some of them would then go after class and do some work on the computers, and others would come back to it after a while, but they would know it existed for the future. Pre-pandemic, people saw IT as something to play with, a substitute for a phone conversation, such as Facebook, games, and YouTube. However, because of the pandemic, people now realise that it's something they need for everyday life. Especially now, everything has gone online, e.g. classes, services, and socialising. This works for both the learners and our teachers. So people before were just using digital to have fun, really. And you can still have fun with digital, but now they realise you need it for everyday life. So delivering remotely has brought about a lot of challenges for us. The most obvious ones is sort of lack of technology for people, problems with Wi-Fi connections, and lack of digital skills to actually get going. And we found that it can take longer to actually build up relationships online. And we've lost some students and teachers because of this, even though we've offered them sort of training and resources, and we're still not entirely sure that they will come back. But we are hopeful, because we did, over sort of the autumn time, we used Bream Hall Centre in Sheffield for our digital skills classes, which helped to build up people's confidence who were more reluctant with the actual online learning. At the other end of the spectrum, we have learners who can access classes and learning from home now, which is fantastic. And they're happy. They're not having to pay for transport, especially those on low income. We had asylum seekers who would have walked across the city for like 2 hours a day just to get to our centre. And over the winter, that would have been very difficult. We've actually, at the moment, we've got one learner who's trapped in Casablanca because of COVID, and she's still coming to classes every week on Zoom. We're accessing people around the world now because they understand digital, they're getting involved. We've got people in different cities around the UK coming to classes. We've got people joining sort of Learn My Way from London and things. It's pretty exciting. But we've decided that in the future, because of this, we've now got to have blended learning, not just with English and digital, but also digital and real life. So we're actually considering now having Zoom participants in a physical classroom with a screen at the back of the room. So people who are on night shifts in other countries can actually attend classes. So we found actually that once people become digitally included, it can give a voice to the voiceless. People can get lost in a large classroom in a physical environment, but with online learning, a teacher can separate students into breakout rooms and ensure everyone speaks. People are learning a lot about digital and IT, and the motivation to learn English and get a job is so great that because of that, they will then learn the digital skills to get there. For example, if they needed to go somewhere that they'd never been before, they would have to use a map to get there and learn how to use the map. This is now the same with digital, and this is fantastic. So we found through FutureProof that our teachers and students are becoming more digital, and the pandemic has actually acted as a catalyst, really. It's speeded everything up, and digital is now a necessity. Despite sort of motivation though, you do have to keep reminding people they have classes, and we have to text them every day and make sure that they do come to class. Despite this, some people do still oversleep and have appointments. But this is part of the personal connection. With the project, it was very obvious really that to get somebody engaged, they needed that one-to-one support. They needed that holistic approach. And to transfer that to online is quite challenging. But we do think we've got there, just about. So we also found that peer-to-peer support was important, both on and offline. The students actually supported each other. They passed on job ideas, gave advice and helped each other with their CVs. Our learners actually liked Future-Proof a lot. And there's one lady who has a young family, and she enjoyed the fact that she could take sort of 5 minutes after class, have a bit of one-to-one talking, and then go home and actually do the courses at home once the children had gone to bed. We had one student who volunteered with us, and she was working in Subway at the same time, and she really didn't like her job. And through the support she received through the programme and sort of building up confidence by volunteering on our reception desk, she's now actually a customer service advisor using her language skills in a sort of big company in Sheffield, and she's really, really happy. So we sort of learned it's important to accommodate people and their individual needs. So people who work night shifts, who can't attend training or learning in the daytime, can actually engage with this programme because they can do it when the time is right for them. And it's hard for people who are working to find time to sort of engage with learning. But we found that people attend on Zoom now through their breaks and on their way to and from houses when they're care workers, which is fantastic. We've got refugees a lot at our centre, a lot of refugees, and they've got the additional pressures of family back home putting pressure on them to make money because they've got no money back home. And they also want to bring families to the UK to rescue them. And to do this, sometimes they have to pay traffickers to actually smuggle their families out of the country to somewhere safe before they can get to a UN building to have the medical tests. And sometimes they have to get plane tickets as well. So making money is a big sort of drive for them. They want to work, they need to work, and they need to have that home ready when the family arrive. They need to have the income, the clothes and the toys. And it's therefore crucial for them to work as much as they can to build up their savings. So learning does not become sort of a top priority for them, but they are aware that they need it. And some of our learners don't have the opportunity to change jobs because they don't have work experience in the UK, or they have very limited language skills. And sometimes they're very anxious because they don't have sort of the confidence to make the jump, and they can suffer from imposter syndrome. There's also sort of issues with sort of PTSD and insomnia. So having a programme and a platform where people can take their own individual path to learning helps them to engage, and it distracts them as well from various sort of bad thoughts as well, and it helps with their well-being. So we found the learning became a positive and constructive well-being distraction as well as a practical employment solution. People are motivated to learn, but they do need to have the accessible, relevant learning and the personal touch of someone who can support them to build up their confidence. Continuous practice develops confidence by reinforcing how to do things on a regular basis. Confidence is needed to be successful in employment in the UK. So to transfer the personal confidence in a face-to-face social setting into an online setting is challenging, but to do that, you need to develop your digital confidence. And we found now that it's sort of a massive advantage for the people that are accessing online learning because they're actually practicing digital, they're applying their digital and they're learning it, and they're using it as a matter of necessity. Like they are with language, it's becoming second nature. And hopefully skills like digital will become a necessary form of communication, and it will become second nature and be retained into the future and can be used in the real world or in the digital world. And then I will be quiet now and let Al introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Hayley. I mean, every time that Hayley speaks, I just learn more and more. So yeah, just absolutely amazing partner to work with for FutureProof and so many other things. And also just an apology from me when I was introducing you. I should have said that, you know, Hayley has a BEM, which is the British Empire Medal. My notes were in the wrong order. It's in recognition of the incredible work that Hayley has done with Learn for Life and for her community. So just thank you so much for being here today. Okay, moving on to our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Joseph Chambers, who's a researcher at Good Things Foundation and who's led on the evaluation and learnings from FutureProof, and who will now explain what this has told us.
Hi everyone, can you all hear me okay? Brilliant. Yes, I'm just going to, as I'll say, give a quick overview of some of the research and the learnings from the project. Obviously, lots of this is kind of covered in our report that's come out about the program as well. So if anyone wants any more further details on this, feel free to give that a read, and you can always email me with any questions. So to start with, I'm going back to kind of the beginning of the program, and during this period we had an opportunity to kind of really reflect, well, to think about what is it that makes up digital skills and how are people kind of approaching this and the gap within this. So during this, what we did is we kind of delved through a lot of the digital skills frameworks, and we really unpicked these, and in addition a lot of kind of behavioral psychology as well, that's thinking about how people develop skills. And what we noted is that traditionally there's a big focus on kind of this very binary measurement of either having skills and not having skills. And often this is kind of also done in a very tick list approach. And what we identified was actually there's kind of a bit more of a few nuances around this. And we thought kind of what we really need to be looking at is this in more of a kind of a non-binary way, seeing how kind of having skills can change over time. In addition, we identified some key behavioral and attitudinal aspects that we really thought as critical in how people develop digital skills. So these being habit, grit, resilience, motivation, confidence, goal setting, trust, and relatedness. So we then decided to, what we want to do is actually test these across the program, across FutureProof. And so we're doing this through kind of a baseline and impact measurement. And so from the project, we had some key outcomes that were kind of really stood out and were incredibly interesting. I think some of the other speakers have picked up on this before. So the first one being, there was a real significant unmet demand for employability training, but this was one that combined and had digital skills interwoven within this. So as Hayley mentioned, what people were really looking for was this kind of flexibility around digital skills training. And we saw this, and this was people that covered all different sorts of demographics. So we had over 66% of learners were from kind of college or university level degrees, with 32% coming from professional managerial backgrounds. So again, what they were looking for was this employability training that combined this digital skills. In addition, there was a need for this kind of holistic support element. So this is where centres such as Hayley's are able to provide this kind of wraparound support that was really needed, whereby people were able to be kind of had trusting relationships. They knew they could rely on the people supporting them. And also they kind of did this over longer periods as well. Our third kind of key outcome was this about the opportunities for remote learning. So again, as Hayley mentioned, there are kind of opportunities with this. You can engage people in new ways. However, certain limitations around people who really kind of rely on that face-to-face interaction. So some of the key stats were, you know, we've engaged and supported over 932 learners. From these, 38 became self-employed, 52 became employed, 41 were able to grow their business, and 65 were able to obtain work experience. So some really kind of positive outcomes. When we look back at some of the motivations and goals that people had for the project, what we could see that keeping up with technology changes in the workplace was really stood out as key for this. In addition, people were looking to gain new qualifications and to find work that was more suitable to their personal circumstances. So a couple of case studies that we had were, for example, there was one called Zoe, and she was looking to get back into employment. Previously, she'd come from a kind of quite a senior role, but being out of work for a while, she realized that her IT skills weren't actually at the level they now needed to be. So she wanted this real kind of positive learning environment. And we also had Gemma, who previously been unemployed, but was really nervous about getting back into learning again. But luckily, through kind of having that direct relationship with staff and volunteers at community centres, she was able to develop her digital skills in a really kind of positive and trusting environment as well. So to reflect on some of the key building blocks, also one, what we identified is, developing those behavioural and attitudinal aspects in tandem with developing, the digital employability skills. That's really critical. And that's where kind of we're seeing the real focus of future programs. There's also this need for holistic support. As the title for this presentation, helping people deal with shocks is the third kind of key critical building block. That means you're able to engage longer term. And beyond this, having learning rooted within their experiences. So this is where that community aspect of community partners really comes to the fore. They are able to have that historical understanding of families, of people, of the area, and they bring this into the learning experience. And really what you have here is, a rooted learning experience is somewhat even better than the tailored learning experiences you can get online. This is one that builds in the understanding of communities and people. So in terms of our recommendations, obviously we've got a few of these on our report, but I'm trying to condense these here. So for policymakers, there's a real need for community-based employability programs, which have digital skills training inherent within them. So digital skills don't always have to be the key focus, but it's one that kind of blends these in seamlessly, so people are able to pick up digital skills as they're doing other things, and vice versa, really. For funders, we point to the need for increased support for kind of the holistic models like future-proof skills for work, where learning environments enable people to develop the soft and hard skills that they need for kind of the workplace of the 21st century. And for practitioners, basically, just keep doing what they're doing, really being able to address those needs and putting people's issues first before kind of any learning. But also to maybe look towards programs like FutureProof, whereby they're able to collect evidence and collaborate with others about how they can support the softer kind of attitudinal behavioural skill development of learners. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a brief kind of introduction into the research side. But again, if you've got any questions, feel free to message me or Al or anyone at Good Things After. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe. And I know we're going at kind of whistle-stop pace, but just a reminder, if as we go, if anything springs to mind that we're not covering immediately, please do post it in the Q&A. We've got definitely enough time to answer your questions, so please do use this time. Okay. Now I would like to hand over to our final speakers, our colleagues from Nesta, who have been critical friends for the FutureProof programme. I'd like to introduce Olivia Chapman and Dr. Cath Sleeman, who lead on Nesta's FutureFit and Mapping Causeways programmes.
Thanks, Al. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Good Things Foundation for organising such a great discussion today. As Al said, I'm just going to present a little bit from FutureFit, which has a great synergy with the FutureProof work. Over the past few years, there's been countless reports and dialogues about the need for more better digital skills and better lifelong learning. In fact, it feels like we've been talking about lifelong learning all lifelong. And even before the pandemic hit, vast numbers of workers were in a precarious situation and many needed extensive upskilling as their jobs were changing radically. So we've got sort of three main aims of this program we call FutureFit. It's to re and upskill workers at risk of automation, test and trial different ways of learning and designing training, making it faster, moving it online, making it free, collaborative, and then generating evidence about what works, which really helps inform what we're doing in the UK. When it's completed, we'll have trained around 1,000 workers in 9 sectors in 5 countries, which is in the Nordics and Benelux. And we do it really importantly in collaboration with lots of partners like FutureProof has done, employers, unions, researchers and training providers. I think it's important to stress that while all the people taking part in our program are learning digital skills, the major focus has been around looking at motivation to learn, as well as developing resilience and confidence so that they can both live and work in an increasingly digital world. We recently published our own report, Learning in a Pandemic, which provides some findings from the program so far. When we started this, of course, we didn't realise that we were going to be in a pandemic and how urgent having digital skills and just even being online would become. The pandemic's brought forward digitisation by about 5 years. And as a result of COVID, the impact is meaning that many people are going to have to change their careers, but moving into a new line of work requires extensive upskilling and reskilling. So I'll just quickly tell you a few findings that we've found. There's about 690 workers that have now been trained in FutureFit, and they work in services, retail, HR, ones that are really changing before the pandemic. In Sweden, the training we did was fully online. In Denmark, it went offline to online as a result of the lockdown. And in Finland, it was a combination of offline and online. 95% of our trainees acquired new digital skills. 70% of them gained new knowledge that helped them deal with the pandemic. Really a real success measure, which is similar to Future Proof, is that those that were able to engage in online communities like Slack had a greater sense of belonging. They felt better supported, they learnt from their peers, and they were able to complete training. That was like super important. And then trainees that dropped out cited barriers that we're probably all really familiar with, which are time, family commitments, and lack of employer support, which is quite depressing that this is still a problem. We really need new approaches to upskilling and reskilling that are innovative and accessible. So much of our research at Nesta shows that the greatest barriers to learning are work schedules, cost, and family responsibilities. It can't just be something that people do in their spare time. Also, we're talking about people who can't take 1 to 2 years off to study. There needs to also be more wraparound support like childcare that allows people the time to focus and do their work. Likewise, there needs to be more products and solutions that are more user-centered and put the learners in the middle of the solution, easier to do, on the go, faster to complete, and recognised by employers as credible, which is what Hayley from Learn for Life was talking about earlier, and why the Good Things Foundation initiative Future Proof is such a success. On a final note, I just thought I'd mention some other work we're doing at Nesta, which is linked to this, because we're entering a huge period of enormous transition, as well as automation. Many of us are starting to urgently look at how we tackle climate change. The government has made loads of bold announcements over the past few months about reaching net zero by 2050, and by doing so, creating or stimulating hundreds of thousands of green jobs. At Nesta, one of our new missions is called A Sustainable Future. And so we've started looking at how we can apply what we've learned from digital skills to the effort to create green jobs and skills. Sorry, I've lost my train there. And unsurprisingly, the recent government initiatives are not going terribly well. For example, there's something called the Green Homes Grant, which was supposed to inspire thousands of tradespeople to reskill and get to work on green homes, but there's been loads of problems. Workers aren't signing up. They're not going to get their green qualifications. So we've been doing a bit of work with a platform called Get My First Job. And what we found out, for example, is young people are really passionate about climate change, but they've got no idea how to pursue environmental training. They don't know how to get a green job. And these are really similar things that we've come across when people are trying to change careers or reskill or get digital skills. I mean, the fourth industrial revolution inspired huge efforts towards digital skills frameworks, programs, interventions. And we think, why can't the same happen for the green revolution? We think there's lots of learnings from digitisation which can be applied to developing green skills and jobs. We've made so many mistakes in the past and we don't want to make them again. The scale of the unemployment crisis is staggering. There's millions that are jobless, with young people hit hardest. It's really daunting, but our preliminary work shows that people are eager to play a role in building the UK's green future. We think we need to hit the ground running now. We know that employers are keen, but we need to sort of harness that energy to build a sustainable recovery. And we need to drive that forward by skilling millions of people with both green and digital skills. Thank you very much. I think I'm all right. Thanks. I think that's me. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And now I'll pass over to Olivia's colleague, Cath.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. I thought I'd take the next 5 minutes to tell you a little bit about our latest report and where I think we should focus our efforts going forward. So our latest report is called Mapping Career Causeways, and in it we've developed a career recommendation algorithm, which essentially just means that we've measured the similarity between just over 1,600 different jobs. We measured similarity using the ESCO and ONIAT frameworks, and each of these frameworks describes the skills and the work activities that you need for different jobs. We took those descriptions and then we used natural language processing to measure how similar they were. So broadly speaking, there are 3 applications for the algorithm. The first application is providing careers advice on helping people to move between jobs. So given a job seeker's most recent job, the algorithm can identify a set of jobs that require similar skills and work activities, and we call these their viable transitions. So in this sense, the algorithm and kind of others like it can be used to potentially broaden the range of jobs that an individual might be considering. The second use case is around helping people to upskill and retrain. So if someone knows the job that they want to move into, we can identify the skills that they may lack based on their current role. And the algorithm can also identify the types of skills that would be most beneficial to the job seeker in terms of opening up new viable transitions. The third use case is identifying groups of workers at risk. So in the report, we focused on automation, and we found that for some groups of workers, not only is their current job at risk of automation, but their viable transitions also appear to be at high risk. So these workers may need extra help and retraining to kind of escape the automation risk that they face. So those are the kind of 3 broad use cases that we foresee for the report. We published the report at the end of November last year, and more recently we've released the code base on GitHub. Anyone's welcome to use it and take it and add to it. It isn't a tool, there isn't a front end on it, but the algorithm can be incorporated into existing tools. So in terms of where we're heading from here, I think there are kind of 3 evidence gaps that I'd really like to fill. The first gap relates to missing labour market information, and I'd like to see rigorous methods developed for measuring green jobs and high quality jobs, or sometimes referred to as decent jobs. So just in the same way that we've developed measures of automation risk, I'd like to see similar measures for these other variables. And crucially though, we need to develop methods that can be continually rerun so that estimates can be kept up to date. The second area I'd like to see development would involve setting standards around these career recommendation algorithms. So through our own research, we've come to recognise just how hard it is to do this well. Even questions like, how do you properly validate one of these algorithms? It's not simple to answer, and there is no right answer because it is all just advice. It's an unsupervised problem. But at the same time, the cost of providing poor careers advice are really large, and we could inadvertently lengthen someone's spell in unemployment. So for that reason, we need to think really carefully about building standards to judge these tools and to build trust in the algorithms. The final gap that I think needs filling is finding out what works in regards to communicating labour market information. So for example, I'd like to know whether telling someone their viable transitions does actually affect their search behaviour. So we're keen to work with partners who have platforms that could run these types of experiments and discover kind of how we can deliver labour market information more effectively. So I'll leave it there just to say that you can find the Mapping Career Causeways project on the Nesta website, and then the full code base is on GitHub. And just to say, if you've got similar research plans, and then please do get in touch because we'd love to work with others. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cath. Again, there's so much in everything that Cath has said today, so please do follow up. I know that this work is, it's ongoing with Nesta at the moment, so there's a real opportunity, as Cath says, to feed in. So that's the end of our speakers. Now that you've heard from everyone, we're going to move on to your questions, and I will try and juggle between ones that are coming in now and ones that we've collected as we've gone along. So the first question we have is from Pauline Roach, and I'd like to put this question to both Joe and Linda. Pauline says, small charities have the trust of local communities, as reported in the recent report from Lloyd's Banking Foundation. What plans do colleagues have to learn from these trusting relationships? So I wonder if Linda, if you want to come in first.
I mean, I guess the question is what employers can do to earn that trust. Absolutely. So, yeah, as I mentioned, it's we have to work together at this, and I think a key thing will be to just make some of this, the learning that's required kind of available in-house within companies. So a first thing is, of course, for employers to recognize the need for kind of lifelong learning, and for I guess making that part of the workday, and setting aside time within your workday to be able to kind of do this kind of learning. And there's so much resource now available, bite-sized learning online. It doesn't have to be kind of week-long courses away in a residential kind of course. There's definitely so much you can do, and I think the pace change has taken a lot of employers by surprise. We've done work, for example, within the facilities management sector, which is seeing huge technological changes, and people working in catering and security, who are often some of the kind of on quite low skills and kind of low pay, and being at the very sort of risk of automation as discussed. But I think even there, some of those employers, and even as you go into the kind of management ranks, actually a lot of this is taking people by surprise, and I think therefore, peer-to-peer business networks where we can learn from each other, and help each other, seeing where all of this change is happening, and that I think that can only help, and I think I'm hoping that will obviously help to kind of build trust within communities, because it shouldn't just be down to kind of charities or government or educational institutions to do this. It's very much part of the employer agenda too.
Thank you. So another question that came in, or an observation, which I think, Hayley, it would be great if you could respond to. Karen wrote, I noticed job adverts for online roles require expensive tech, not your old home computer, and this often puts people off applying for roles they could do, but didn't have the equipment or funds to upgrade their own. How can we address this kind of a challenge about personal access, do you think?
I think, well, we need the government to make Wi-Fi free for everybody, but that's going to take a while, I think. A lot of employers will support people with technology. So if they do start a new job, they can hopefully get the technology off the employer. But it is very challenging. As an online centre, we've been involved in the Devices.now project, and we've distributed devices to over 120 people in Sheffield through Devices.now. And so programs like that are really beneficial. But we found, even with courses, we've had to do a crowdfunder to get money to pay for people's internet data so they can access things online. So I agree really that it is very challenging, but people shouldn't be put off, because there are resources there to support people. And I think if you're the right candidate, an employer will, in this day and age, be able to give you the equipment you need to be able to work from home.
Thank you. Catherine Perry has asked, and I'll open this up to any of the panel because it's a really great question. What future funding opportunities do you think there will be available for this agenda? What great, and a link to this, kind of what do we think, Hayley, I'll come to you at the end of this question, what greater support do centres need to enable this type of programmes? So happy if any of the panellists want to take that one, because I think it's important to us all. Sorry, maybe if I come to Nesta first.
You want to answer, Cath?
In terms of future funding opportunities, I mean, I guess programs like Restart that have recently been announced would probably be one place to look.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And Hayley, thinking about kind of what kind of funding models make this actually a reality that you can, deliver and support? What do you need in terms of those resources?
You need the flexibility of the funders. So with Future Proof, you had the flexibility where you have, somebody could go and they could do like the whole of one platform in a week if they wanted to, or they could do it bit by bit over a period of time. And that was the wonderful thing about it, was the flexibility. And I think funders need to realise that nobody is the same. Everybody's got their own individual concerns, their own lives. And the important thing about being a centre, and going back to the trusted comment, is you've got to be someone, you know, we've got to be, we're trusted by our sort of students and clients, and the funder needs to trust the centre to know what's best for their particular client. And the programs need to be flexible. They need to be something that people can engage with, because otherwise you're going to end up with sort of poor retention, poor attainment, and all this is what like further education is going on about, where they're worrying about attendance and things. But with programs like this, you don't need to worry about that, because people can go home and do it. People can do it in their own time. Or you can have people that do sit there religiously. We've got people that have done Learn My Way from start to end, and they just did that continuously for weeks on end, and they, you know, they really enjoyed it. But then there's other people who can only do maybe an hour a week, and that's fine, or maybe 15 minutes in a day, and that's perfectly okay. So funders need to be flexible.
Great, thank you. And this is a question that's come in from Liz. Can Linda share any practical examples of how Accenture encourages their employees to embrace lifelong learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, at the moment, we are all being asked by our Chief Technology Officer to do something called TQ, which stands for Technology Quotient. So it's like IQ, but with technology, so TQ. And actually, throughout our business at the moment, you can imagine it's kind of an undertaking with 500,000 staff, but it's being, you know, it's not just our techies who do programming for our clients every day, but people like myself, people who are doing finance, people who are doing, you know, legal work, people who are, you know, our executive assistants. Everyone is basically being asked to take a core set of 6 courses around what is cloud computing, what is what is, gosh, what are they all about, what's AI, you know, and so that we can carry some basic conversations about these things throughout our business. And I think these are kind of things that businesses need to kind of think about. They're sort of quite good, aren't they, at kind of helping you learn those very technical skills that are, you know, directly applicable to your job today, but actually it's those kind of wider skills that will really help you as well, and will be transferable. Absolutely.
Thank you. I think this may be the last question we'll be able to get through, but I know there are more, so I will share these with the panels and panelists, and when we do a write-up, we'll make sure that we respond to all of them. So I'm just picking up on this question from Mark, who says, really fascinating talks, many thanks to all. Just reflecting on the focus of skills and demands on training and retraining and confidence, how do we help those most excluded and long-term unemployed, who are most vulnerable but also struggle to access the labour market because of deep structural barriers? How can the future skills agenda encompass and address these inequalities too? So there's a lot in there, but I wonder whether I come to Jo, because we've been thinking about this across a lot of our programmes.
Yeah, thanks, Al. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, and it's, yeah, as you mentioned, it definitely covers lots of what we're working on, good things at the moment. I think a lot about it, well, to think about something we've been working on recently, a lot of it for the people who are excluded and long-term unemployed. A critical thing we've picked up on recently is, and what Hayley mentioned too, is the aspect of maintaining like momentum with learning and with engagement. So which I think was where kind of the flexibility element of the funding that Hayley was talking about really comes into play, is that what centres and community partners will understand is that often it's not just about getting someone to a certain level or making sure you can tick off everything they've done. What actually has a bigger impact is, you know, being able to maintain that engagement with someone, whether it's for a week, for months, or for a year, so that when they do kind of have a challenge in their life or something that like appears, they know that they can then turn to people like Hayley and they can say, I'm having an issue with this, and it often will overlap with something digital. It might be something to do with universal credit, it might be something to do with learning, it might be something to do with their family. And so I think by programs and projects that really focus on enabling flexibility to help centres maintain momentum is really critical. And in terms of those who are most vulnerable, I guess, and struggle to access the labour market because of the deep structural barriers, I think what we've seen is that it can, in addition to kind of lots of the key vulnerable groups that I think are identified in various reports, whether it's people from kind of low income backgrounds or people where like social mobility is difficult in certain cities, it can also hit people that were previously kind of unexpected. So often people may be in a certain area of work for a long period of time. All their IT skills that they've developed have been in that job or in that role. And so when a sudden shock hits, like COVID, and it kind of switched to remote learning, it means that, you know, their digital skills weren't what they thought, and they have a sudden kind of realization that they need help, they need support. So in terms of a future skill agenda that can, I guess, address these and encompass kind of all the inequality as well, it needs to have that understanding about, I guess, the time impacts of when shocks hit, so that because suddenly you'll get an overlooked group or a certain kind of demographic that we hadn't thought of before, and when COVID hit, you can suddenly realize. So ultimately, yeah, I guess it's about that flexibility. It's about that situated understanding of local areas, and it's really relying on that community aspect and that holistic knowledge that places like Learn for Life have, and to harness those.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep us to time, so I will, as I say, make sure that we respond to all the questions. We'll be collecting those up, and when we feedback after the webinar, we will make sure that those responses are included. I'd just like to close by saying thank you all for your participation today, and especially our speakers, all our future-proof community partners, Heidi and Caris, for the organisation of the event. I think the thing is that today's conversation is highly topical and highly relevant. It's a really challenging one to answer when we've been in crisis mode for such a long time. But now, as we move towards the lifting of national restrictions and the opening up of the economy, change is needed to address the challenges that sit at this intersection between employment and digital skills. What I think has been clear this morning is that we need a person-centred approach to educate and motivate in a captivating way, so that digital skills are interchangeable with the way that we think about work and employment. As I said, we'll be sending round post-event information to all attendees, so do follow up with us if you'd like to hear more or collaborate directly. Thank you very much for your time. Do stay safe, and I hope you have a very good and productive day. And actually, I finished a little bit early, so you've 4 minutes back, but thank you all very, very much.